The question is, what's going to happen when these cars interact with each other? I think it's really hard to say what will happen in, say, 2090, or 24% this, or 37% that. It's pretty hard to do, especially when we couldn't predict the iPhone or the 2008 financial crisis. It's pretty hard to predict long term. So this talk is basically about that car that's in the air, which is machine learning, and what we could do to get ready. So the first thing is, why even talk about artificial intelligence or machine learning? And the reason I like to do this is because everyone is talking about it, everyone is into this, everyone's asking these questions, and a lot of people want to know, what is it? Is it real or is it fake? Is it overblown? Are hackers going to use it against us? And can we trust people who talk about AI when they're trying to, talk about a product? So this is something I wrote a while back. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's machine learning is a lot like love and sex. Basically, if you learn about them and you talk about them with people you care about and friends and loved ones, then it's fine. But if someone tries to talk about you, about these things with you, while they're trying to sell you something, they are probably lying to you. So I think it's good to start with some definitions. So a good definition of artificial intelligence is attempting to design something that can advance their goals and make decisions inside of an environment. This is a good overarching one. My preferred definition is actually something a little bit more clear, which is doing things that can only be done by humans before. So talking about AI today, what we're usually talking about though is actually machine learning. And the idea there is basically computers learning from data, which is a really crazy concept. It's the idea that you don't have to train it, you could just feed it more data and it learns. So supervised learning is basically assigning a label, like a cat or a dog or a car or a truck. And unsupervised learning is basically looking for patterns and clusters inside of data. Then there's reinforcement learning, which is also very cool. This is basically really advanced A/B testing, where you continually try to see which one is more effective. And here's the definition for how to basically understand these. You've got artificial intelligence at the top, you've got machine learning underneath that, and then you have different types of machine learning. So the other thing is the Terminator and the Skynet and all this. This is actually has a particular term for itself. It's called AGI, with G standing for general. So artificial general intelligence. And a lot of people, when they hear AI, they think about this one, but the experts understand that this is very far away. So this is not something we have to worry about in the next couple of decades, most people think. So the reason people are so excited about machine learning is because it allows you to find patterns, isolate variables, and then, of course, make predictions. So basically, when you apply this to just regular human endeavors, we're talking about translating human speech, we're talking about image recognition, we're talking about new approaches to problems, predicting when someone's going to buy something, predicting what they're going to like based on what they liked before, and maybe even predicting who will commit crime. So the best way to highlight some of these is with examples. Can everyone hear me? Everything good? I can't actually see the audience right now. Everything good?
Yeah, everything is good.
Okay. So yeah, the best way to sort of jump into this is to talk about examples. So we heard about AlphaGo, where it beat Lee Sedol in Go. So AlphaGo ran on 1920 CPUs. It had 280 GPUs, and it took multiple years to train it. And it was an absolutely fantastic system. It did some really cool stuff, and it surprised the whole world. And you know, after beating chess, now it beat Go. But what most people don't know is that they immediately made a better version called AlphaGo Zero. And it only used a fraction of the resources. But it didn't actually get trained from chess masters. It taught itself through machine learning. It basically just played itself over and over. So this is how it did. Day 0, it didn't go so well. 3 days in, it starts learning extremely fast. And it just keeps going. And then it passes in 21 days, it goes past AlphaGo Master and just keeps learning. And we're not even teaching it anything, it's just playing itself. So 40 days later, it became the undisputed best Go player in the world, including beating all the other previous computers, and it didn't even need any human intervention. So here's another example. This one is pretty scary. So a team basically took a set of 5 non-disclosure agreements and gave them to 20 really, really good lawyers. And they also had an algorithm off on the side that's going to compete against these 20 lawyers. So the AI beat the lawyers. It had 94% accuracy, and the lawyers had 85% accuracy. And that's pretty cool, but that's not what's scary. Here's what's scary. The lawyers took an average of 92 minutes to get to 85%, and the AI beat their accuracy in 26 seconds. So that's a little bit frightening. Then there's other examples from medicine where you have algorithms identifying diseases faster and more accurately. But one that just happened recently was the Google Duplex demo, where you could have someone call in, interact with a human, and actually, make reservations like an assistant. It had lots of actual difficulty in the interaction. It actually had someone misunderstand them, give the wrong time, and the AI actually corrected and got the conversation back on track, and eventually put it on the calendar. It's also getting really easy to emulate voice. There's actually no sound on this one, but this is Obama and Trump interacting in their own voices, but it's actually not them. And you could just Google for this this text in the image, and you'll find this, and you'll hear a conversation between two presidents, and it didn't actually ever happen. So there's another really powerful concept here, which is the idea of coverage versus depth. Okay, so there's one question of machine learning: can it beat can the best machine learning beat the best human? That's one question. But I think there's a much more important question, which is, what is not being analyzed currently that could be analyzed if we had machine learning, right? So just think about how much data is actually in the world that could be looked at, like all the trees, looking at the planet from satellites, looking at every single packet going across the network. We're looking at a tiny fraction, with many zeros after the decimal point, of what we actually could look at, and we're not seeing very much. Right. And here's the problem. The data that we're producing is doing this, and the population isn't growing that fast. We just don't have enough people to look at all this content, right? So here's a couple examples. These are stars. Or maybe they're asteroids. We actually don't know if they're asteroids or they're stars. Well, a few of them we do, but it's really hard to tell the difference. And this is actually the current plan for finding asteroids, right? We have amateur astronomers, and there's some professionals, but mostly amateur astronomers looking in their spare time to try to find these things. And of course, if they're not distracted, hopefully they do a good job, but it is really hard to look at the whole sky all the time. It's the same thing with intelligence work, with security intelligence, or government intelligence or whatever. The NSA a long time ago was talking about, well, we need to break into encryption or whatever. But the fact is, they don't even speak languages. They can't even monitor the conversations that they can see, let alone seeing more conversations, because there just aren't enough people to look at the data, right? So if you imagine machine learning looking at the world, it would see objects. It would be able to identify objects. It's computer vision, and to be able to do this all the time, everywhere, is something that a lot of people are working on. So a team from MIT recently built a system that actually uses Wi-Fi, and it bounces radio frequencies off your body. It actually can hit your shirt, and it can see the motion of your shirt from your heartbeat, combined with your breathing rhythm, and then it can run an algorithm against that and tell you if you're happy or sad or upset. So all sorts of things that you could do with machines that can see. And a good example of that is InfoSec, right? In terms of being able to look at lots and lots of different data. How much is being processed by an average company, right? Terabytes, all the time, multiple terabytes. And you have some people who can look at some screen, but their eyes get tired, they get sleepy, they get bored, whatever happens, right? It's a matter of AI being able to do this without getting sick, without getting tired. AI only has to be better than nobody doing the job. It doesn't have to be better than the best human. So that brings us to the idea of bug bounties. I'm sure everyone's familiar with bug bounties, but so I've done a bunch of this research myself and participated in a few of these, and it's a lot of fun. But when you have a target that has 50,000 websites, and they have 15 million IPs, and they're changing all the time, most of your time is spent just watching the paint dry, right? You're just watching nothing. You're hoping something happens. And then when a whole bunch of stuff does change, you have to find the change that actually matters. Well, that happens to be exactly the thing that machine learning is good at. It can look at all that data and can find the thing that actually matters. It's a lot like the asteroid problem. So if you think about what machine learning and bounties are actually doing, right? It translates really well to the future of what security is going to look like with machine learning, right? So you have supervised learning that basically says, is this thing that I'm looking at, is it vulnerable or is it not vulnerable? Does it have SQL injection? Does it not have SQL injection? And that's supervised. Then you have unsupervised, where it says, hey, these websites are similar. You're not actually sure how they're similar, but they're similar in some way. Same with these network ranges. Or maybe these internal employees are also similar. And maybe that's because they're extra vulnerable or they're extra not vulnerable to phishing or bribery or something. So that kind of takes us to exactly where this is heading in terms of the future of people attacking and defending using AI. It's all about curating, collecting, filtering, and choosing the very best targets and the very best defenses. So if you're an attacker, you're going to have AI, you're going to have machine learning that says, go look at all the websites and bring me back the ones that are the most vulnerable. And if you know anything about deep learning, that means you're going to look at all sorts of variables. You're going to look at the DNS, you're going to look at the stack, you're going to look at all these different things. And it's not just the obvious ones that we know about. It's going to look at thousands of variables. And it's going to find the ones that it knows are already vulnerable, and it's going to use that as the training data. Find me a person that looks bribable inside of an internal company so I can steal something from that company. Find every company that has lots of money and also probably has no backups, because that's who we're going to do ransomware against, right? And then if you're on the defense side, you have to run the AI also. So find me everyone with a low stability score, who we think they might, give away some internal data for some money or something. Or find me every website that looks exactly like the one that we already had compromised. Or find me an employee that looks like someone who got compromised before. So all this stuff, this is what's really crazy about this. All of this stuff that we just talked about, it just happened in like the last 5 years or so, right? Because machine learning and expert systems, all this stuff has been around for decades, but nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, we had this big jump the last 5 or 10 years, and we've gone from basically not being able to beat a human at chess to being able to imitate human speech and read emotions with Wi-Fi. And that is just day zero, basically, of this thing starting. So I want to talk a little bit about, I guess I could pause. Do we want to pass around a mic and ask some questions or anything?
No, go ahead.
Any questions from the group?
No questions at the moment. We can have at the end, Daniel.
Okay. So here's something to think about going forward with machine learning and artificial intelligence moving further in cybersecurity. So there's this thing called adversarial examples, where basically when you train AI, it learns a very specific thing. And part of the problem is that, and I know a lot of people are already experts in AI, so this is remedial for them, but basically the training data matters a lot. And part of the problem is we don't actually know how the AI is learning. So we don't know exactly what variables it's picking up on to make its decisions. So this face paint on the left is from a band in the US. And because the face paint is black around the chin, it actually confuses facial recognition into thinking that's where the face is. And it completely messes up most facial recognition. And of course we have also here a picture of a car who basically had chalk written around it, and it wasn't able to drive because it thought that was the lane. So it was basically stuck. So you imagine attackers trying to do this to street signs or to road signs or to paint on the road, and you can cause a lot of problems because of how the machine learned. You could do the same thing with image recognition, numbers, digits, all sorts of assumptions that are being made by the algorithms. This one is really, really cool. So this one, this author, Yuval Noah Harari, is an author. He wrote Sapiens, he wrote Homo Deus, and he just wrote 21 questions for the 21st century. And I've read all three, and they're really good. I actually just saw him live in San Francisco as well. But this is a really cool concept here. The most important fact anybody who is alive today needs to know about is that we are becoming hackable animals. So what he's talking about is AI algorithms basically learning our desires and our preferences and what we like to do. So if you think of Netflix, you think of Amazon, you think of these systems that are predicting the products that we want. So I'm in San Francisco. It's actually possible to be clicking around in Amazon. Don't buy anything, but it shows up. And when it shows up, you're like, oh, I was going to buy that. But they shipped it to you before you bought it, right? So it's a prediction. So if it knows what you're watching, it knows what you want to eat, it knows what you're wearing, it's going to tell you who to date, it's going to tell you who to marry, it's going to tell you where you should work. It's a real risk to human autonomy. This one is really interesting. It's, Deepfakes was a username of someone who started doing this. This person started putting Nicolas Cage's faces on everything. He's already in enough movies. I don't know why he needed any help. But so basically you could take Nick Cage's face and put it on any other character. And I'm pretty sure this is Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek The Next Generation. But this looks pretty good. I mean, it looks like it could be him. And this is something that AI is doing very quickly. And you could actually do it not just with pictures, but also with video. And then this is the thing that I was showing you before. This actually, I have an account. I'm actually training an AI right now to emulate my voice, which everyone's going to have this as a problem pretty soon. It's just a matter of the training data, right? But so someone just did an example of this. He actually trained his voice for about an hour using this tool right here. It's a free tool. You can just go play with it at that URL. And using this tool, he called his mom. And he had a speakerphone to play the sound effects. And he recorded like 3 or 4 sound effects, or 3 or 4 sentences. The sentences were like, hey, I'm going to go to the store, do you want anything? And then she says, no, that's okay, I'll be home soon. And he says, okay, goodbye, I'll talk to you later. The AI said all of those things, and even his own mother did not know it was not him. Because that's how good it sounded, and it only took 1 hour to train the AI. So really what we're talking about is kind of a situation where what happens if you can't trust your eyes and you can't trust your ears? Because anyone on TV or radio or whatever could be saying anything and you don't know if it's true. All right, so those are some of the problems that are definitely coming towards us. So I want to give some practical advice on what to do about this. And this is going to cross what you could do as a person, as an individual, and also what you could do as a security person. So first one is to know the difference between these things. Know the difference between AGI, which is a computer that's smarter than a human and better than a human at intellectual tasks, which people think is 10 to 40 years away. That's the range for most experts. And know the difference between that and machine learning, which is basically machines just learning from data, but it's very restricted to just that task. Basically understand that machine learning is basically about to become like Excel or database. So if you're trying to decide if you're going to invest in some company, and you go to the company and you say, hey, what are you guys doing? And they say, oh, we're really good, we have Excel. You're going to say, well, that's fine, what are you doing with it? And they say, oh no, it's fine, we have a database. Well, everyone has a database, everyone has Excel. So pretty soon the question is not going to be, do you have it, but what are you doing with it? This one is super, super critical. Imagine that you are a character in a game. Your character sheet needs to have these skills, okay? You need to be able to pull data from places using programming. You need to be able to contact APIs, collect data. You need to be able to do statistics and machine learning against this data. And then the third one is so, so important. You've got to be able to present that data that you did in the second phase into a story, into a narrative, into a UI, into an explanation that compels someone to do something. If you could do all three of these, then you have a lot of defense for some amount of time until AGI comes, then we have a real problem. But you'll have some good defense against automation taking jobs. Understand that specialists need to be generalists, right? This is something I talk about when I do hiring, right? You always want to understand what the goal is. You always want to understand both tactics and strategy. You know, don't solve the wrong problem. Cross-discipline is really important. The more you know about other disciplines, the better off, the more resistant you're going to be. Adding some art to the science and being able to communicate really, really well. Having a brand, this one's kind of interesting and kind of strange, but you need to know what you're about. You need to know what you are good at and be able to broadcast that. Practice using your own voice, because this is the type of thing that machines and automation and robotics are not going to be able to do for quite some time. So you want to stand out and be able to have this. And basically knowing what your projects are, and being able to speak and broadcast yourself through your projects. Because of the situation with spoofing audio and spoofing video, we as a society are going to need a lot of help understanding what good sources are. And that goes back to this one. Having a brand, some people are going to have a brand of being a good source of information because they read a lot and they don't have much bias. So people are going to latch on to others who have a good brand. So you want to be one of those people. Know yourself to make it harder for someone to hack your brain, right? It's harder for someone to influence you if you can see it coming. Look for opportunities where you are simply overwhelmed with too much content, right? Too much data on the hard drives, too much data in the cloud, too many security events coming into your SOC, too many IRs. All those situations are ripe for the new series of companies that are coming in to basically take some of that off of you. I know a number of companies that are basically offering to increase the number of SOC people that you have at the tier 1 level by like 10 times or 100 times just by adding AI. And finally, we really just have to get ready for this. We have to prepare for machine learning coming. It's going to disrupt jobs. It's going to change things quite a bit, right? And instead of rejecting it, we've got to accept it, and we've got to do the things I talked about in this collection here to be more resistant and survive it as best we can. I do think there's reason for optimism. I think ultimately it's about augmentation, right? It's about having the machines do what's best for their skill sets and have us do the best for our skill sets. Definitely recommend these books if you want to read more. Life 3.0, it actually opens with a fiction story. It's really, really good. Homo Deus is from Harari, I told you about. The master algorithm talks about all the different attempts that we made to do machine learning and the strengths and weaknesses. And what to think about machines that think is like a collection of like hundreds of very, very small essays. Really, really good stuff. And if you want to reach out and chat about this stuff, feel free to do so. And I'm going to go ahead and pause there for questions.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. You're mentioning that with this AI and machine learning, you're going to have a lot of distrust. One is not sure about the news or about even the voice one could fake and all that. So much of mistrust that would come with AI and ML. Would the society would be more miserable than what it is today?
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, it actually gives more power to the people who want to do harm, right? Because so when you have people who are vulnerable because they will believe anything, and you have people who are malicious and they want to change the minds and change the direction, all this technology is going to help them. Now, the good news is, you and me and everyone else in the room, we could broadcast a clear signal. And other people can listen to that clear signal, and as long as that stays direct, we can be okay, and we can sort of rebuild the broadcast. But the problem is millions of people will be listening to bad broadcasts. Because there's two different things that are bad about this. One, you will believe fake things that happen, but you won't believe real things that happen. And so it's two things. It's a double-edged sword. So something horrible could happen, and then everyone who doesn't want to believe it will not believe it. And then if something good happens, they could say, oh, that didn't actually take place, because it's probably faked. So people will basically believe what they emotionally want to believe.
Okay, right. Now, another question is that there's a lot of fear in the mind of the people with AI and ML. People could be losing their jobs, and there would be a job loss. Would that, you think, would be a reality in the days ahead?
Yeah, there's basically no question. The only debate is about how much and how fast. It's a very, very serious problem. There are a number of people working on it, but think of it this way, and this is a little bit scary, but again, this is all in the interest of seeing the truth so you can get ready. And that's why I have in this deck the things that you should do to get ready, and things your kids should do, and your friends' kids. Everyone needs to understand these things because it'll make you more resistant. But think of it this way. For so many companies, the number one draw against their profits is their workforce, right? So going back 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, there wasn't any option. It was only human labor. But now we can actually make much more money. So for example, in the United States, a bunch of people went to McDonald's and all the fast food, and they said, you must pay all your people $15 an hour. And they said, oh, really? Okay, no problem. And within like 6 months, they now have full-size kiosks and no people. You just walk up and you press the screen and the food comes out. Of course, they have some people cooking because they haven't made the robots yet. But anytime there's a human there, the way they're thinking is that is lost money because that person gets sick, you have to train them, they're not very good. So if you just think that the most powerful people in the world are spending billions of dollars to not have human workers, that's how you know it's a problem.
Morning, Daniel.
Morning.
There is a totally contrarian view which was presented yesterday by surprisingly an ophthalmologist. In India, they are doing a research project with assistance from both Google and Microsoft in one of the most famous eye hospitals. He says for this diabetic retinopathy, if he uses ML, the number of ophthalmologists who have to analyze it is going to increase, and almost the whole of 1.3 billion population of India can be tested for this retinopathy And that is definitely going to increase the number of jobs for the ophthalmologists. What is your take on that?
So how were they saying that it was going to increase the number of people?
Because now people are not coming for testing because of the cost involved or the fear.
Oh, yeah.
But
So you're saying
when you are
even if the AI is doing the analysis, there will be supporting people to help with the analysis.
Exactly, and you can easily do it at a much lesser cost, and more people can be brought into this testing.
Yeah. No, so let me clarify that. This creative destruction is what's often caused by this, right? Where you have disruption. Lots of jobs will be lost. Lots of new jobs will also start. And I think what this person was talking about, what you're talking about, is a good example of that. But put it this way, there are lots of radiologists, the best radiologists in the world, who, I don't know how long they go to school, like 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. And they are losing the analysis piece to the AI. So here's what I would say. If you have cameras at home, and you have a good camera from whatever, an iPhone camera, a Galaxy camera, or whatever, and you put it on someone's arm, and you're able to look at a spot on their skin, and the algorithm is able to do the adjustment. You know, so someone had to build the camera, someone had to build the algorithm and everything, but ultimately, if you wanted to get that same amount of coverage using humans, you would not have been able to do it. So I think long term, it's going to be a reduction. And for most people, it's going to be a severe reduction who aren't in tech and don't have the jobs that we have. I mean, this is another good example of this is trucking inside of the United States. There's something like, I can't remember the exact number. It's something like 3.5 or 5 million or something truckers, right? And we're talking about replacing them with autonomous vehicles. Well, you still have some truckers there. In fact, you might have a new job for trucking, which is to inspect or drive on the automated trucks to do refueling and to steer around, you know, if something gets in the road or something. So you're going to have a new role, but then it'll be a net loss. And I think if you look at all the jobs, and there's some really good analysis by McKinsey that looks at this. It basically looks at customer service, it looks at transportation, it looks at food service, it looks at farming, it looks at all these things. And you'll have some gains and you'll have some losses, but if you look at the numbers overall, it's not good. Now let me give you a positive, optimistic view of this, okay? And this will be a little bit crazy, a little bit philosophical, but I think you'll like it. Basically, think of it this way. For all of Earth's history, we have been focused on doing physical labor, right? Just now we are finally, at this last moment, we're doing cognitive labor. But really, we shouldn't be doing labor. We should be creating art. We should be sharing things with each other. We should be, sharing creative endeavors across the world with each other, as opposed to just spending all of our time sleeping and doing something difficult. So there's a positive view of this, which basically says, okay, the machines will come, they will do all the jobs, that's fine, but that will free us up to do something much better, to think and to love and to share and do these nice things. The problem is, what happens in the middle time? And can we actually get to that good place? Or will something bad happen before that?
Okay.
Thank you, Daniel. It was a brainstorming session with insights of machine learning.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Okay, take care.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Please check your voting pads for the feedback.
Thank you.